definitely.
Right.
Subcommittee on National Security will come to order. Without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. The Department of Veteran Affairs operates one of the nation's largest health care delivery systems. To help meet the changing medical needs of the veteran population, the VA has increasingly leased medical facilities to provide health care to veterans. This hearing will review the process by which the VA leases outpatient clinics. Through the examination of specific cases, such as the community-based outpatient clinic at St. Johns County, Florida, we'll aim to identify inefficiencies in the lease procurement process in order to formulate solutions that will benefit veterans who seek access to nearby modern medical facilities. The VA's Office of Construction and Facility Management stated in a VA fact sheet that major lease projects for replacement or new medical facilities are ready to serve patients within 5 years from the, quote, start date. GAO report, though, on this topic from April 2014 revealed that 39 of the 41 projects reviewed with a contract value of about $2.5 billion experienced schedule delays ranging from 6 months to 13.3 years, with an average delay of 3.3 years. With respect to the outpatient clinics surveyed in the GAO's report, 94% of the delays occurred prior to signing the lease agreement. This means that the vast majority of delays occurred during the planning phase, not during construction or renovation of new outpatient clinics. Costs also increased for all 31 lease projects for which VA had complete cost data, primarily due to delays and changes to the scope of the project. First-year rents increased a total of $34.5 million, an annual cost that will extend for the life of the lease, normally for 20 years. Some specific examples help bring these statistics to life. The outpatient clinic in Austin, Texas, has experienced the largest size and cost increase from the time the authorization for the clinic was approved by Congress. The size increased from 85,000 square feet to 135,000 square feet during its first renovation, and increased during a second renovation to a final total of 185,000 square feet. The total first-year cost tripled from $6.2 million to $19.8 million. An increase of $8.4 million in the cost of the lease will impact the VA's annual budget for the duration of the 20-year lease. The outpatient clinic in Jacksonville, Florida, experienced the longest delay of the projects reviewed by GAO in their report. Due to an increase in size and the need to procure additional land adjacent to the existing property to fit the new facility, the total delay amounted to more than 13 years. County officials in St. Johns County, which is the district that I represent, have been involved in trying to facilitate a new location for the Veterans Community-Based Clinic since late 2011. The outpatient clinic in question serves 5,000 veterans. St. Johns County notified the VA in 2011 about the sale of the property where its current outpatient clinic is located. The notification provided more than 3 years for the VA to procure a new permanent clinic site and vacate the current facility by March 31, 2015. Today, 3.5 years have passed since the initial notification, and the VA still has not selected a permanent site for its new outpatient clinic or vacated the current facility. After VA's lease expired for the current outpatient clinic in March, the VA began paying a penalty of approximately $50,000 per month. At the end of September, the penalty will double to approximately $100,000 per month. Without a solution for a permanent clinic in place, the VA is forced to construct and open an interim clinic at even additional cost to the taxpayers. This situation is not supporting the services that our veterans need in my district. It's not showing good stewardship of taxpayer dollars, and it is not unique to my district in Florida. So this hearing is about meeting the needs of veterans in my district and across the country who could benefit tremendously from the VA executing lease procurement in a much more efficient and effective manner than the examples I've highlighted. We look forward to hearing from our panel of witnesses today as we aim to find solutions to this issue. And I now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Liu, who is sitting in for Mr. Lynch, who is the ranking member of our subcommittee, for his opening statement. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me first ask for permission to submit the opening statement of Ranking Member Lynch for the record.
Without objection.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to examine major lease projects at the Department of Veteran Affairs. I also want to welcome our witnesses and thank you for your public service. Ever since Secretary McDonald was confirmed last year, I have seen a sea change in leadership. I have seen Secretary McDonald take seriously the reports of deficiencies at the VA and work hard to try fix them. The VA has already undertaken tremendous efforts to respond to the recommendations made by these various reports, conducted its own studies on how the VA could improve, and implemented department-wide changes. I am pleased to inform you the following efforts that VA has completed. Elimination of redundant approval requirements. The VA has now eliminated the requirement that the Secretary approve leases between $300,000 and $1 million in annual unserviced rent when they were already receiving approval through the VA strategic capital investment process. Instead of the redundant approval, the Secretary will be briefed regularly on all projects approved through that process. Over the past several years, the VA has also issued new policies and procedures in a number of areas, including leasing procurements, establishing requirements, procurement steps, pre-award vetting, compliance, and quality assurance. Many of the new policies and procedures issued are a result of recommendations made by the OIG, GAO, and congressional members. So again, the VA leadership is taking seriously reports made by these various agencies. Contracting reorganization. In fiscal year 2014, the VA Office of Acquisition, Logistics, and Construction restructured its contracting groups, allowing for a clearer division of labor and decision-making authority between contracting officers and project management. In addition, leasing officials have been integrated into OALC's contracting arm to provide contracting assistance, review, and oversight of lease procurements. The VA has also engaged in standardization of GSA delegation requests. The VA has implemented an internal review and approval process for delegation requests to be submitted to GSA to ensure consistency and completeness of submissions department-wide. I've also seen significant changes within my own district at the West Los Angeles VA campus. After 4 decades of dysfunction, we now have the Secretary settling a major lawsuit, having a master plan being set up in October, having stakeholders come in and improve the quality of health care and to help address homeless veterans. I also want to specifically thank Caroline Clancy, Vince Kane, and so many others who are turning the West LA VA in my district into a model for other VAs. We're also specifically working with the VA on enhanced use leases, and I look forward to this hearing. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Thank you. I will hold the record open for 5 legislative days for any members who would like to submit a written statement. We will now recognize our panel of witnesses. I'm pleased to welcome Mrs. Stella Fiodas, Executive Director, Office of Construction and Facilities Management at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Mr. Norbert Doyle, Chief Procurement and Logistics Officer, Veterans Health Administration at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Mr. David Wise, Director of the Physical Infrastructure Team at the Government Accountability Office, and Mr. Jerry Cameron, Assistant County Administrator for St. Johns County, Florida, although not much longer, as I understand. Welcome to you all. Pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses will be sworn in before they testify, so if you please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All witnesses answered in the affirmative. Thank you. You may be seated. In order to allow time for discussion, please limit your testimony to 5 minutes. Your entire written statement will be made part of the record. Mrs. Fiodas will be giving one oral statement on behalf of both witnesses from the Department of Veterans Affairs, and she is recognized for 5 minutes. Go.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Department of Veterans Affairs leasing program. The department's main priority is to provide high-quality care and benefits to veterans in facilities that meet our mission requirements and are procured legally, constructed soundly, and comply with federal regulations. In many cases, leasing some of those facilities rather than constructing and owning all medical space allows VA flexibility to best adapt to demographic shifts and the evolving needs of our nation's veterans. While VA is working to deliver world-class facilities to best care for our veterans, we are also aggressively working to shorten the delivery timelines for our leases by improving and streamlining VA's internal and external processes in implementing agency-wide programmatic changes. We are also working with our partners in the Office of Management and Budget, General Services Administration, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and experts from the private sector to achieve maximum efficiencies and implement best practices in our leases. Even though leasing provides an essential tool in helping ensure veterans have access to VA care and services, we face limitations in our ability to deliver these leases. We are often unable to swiftly provide healthcare facilities and make decisions that are in the best interest, first of our veterans and second of taxpayers, because of the framework within which we operate. There is a long list of laws, regulations, and rules that frequently control and govern our efforts to deliver timely access to facilities and services. VA's compliance with these requirements narrows what could be a universe of options into a small, tightly controlled box of what we are legally able to accomplish. When compared with the private sector, we are critically hamstrung by the impact of these constraints. Private care providers have greater freedom than VA to negotiate directly and to select a developer, a site, an architect, general contractor, and the lease terms that allow for the fastest possible delivery of care to patients. The St. Augustine Community-Based Outpatient Clinic is an example of how VA's timelines are affected and our options limited because of these factors. We were late starting what we knew was the required lengthy competitive process to find new space. For that, we accept responsibility. But soon after starting, the project was placed on hold while VA and GSA worked out issues related to VA's leasing authority. After the project resumed, we experienced difficulty with offers achieving operating lease status according to OMB Circular A11. As a result, VA has requested multiple rounds of proposals from offerers. If we are unable to achieve operating lease status, our options will be further limited. In compliance with federal acquisition regulations and GSA regulations, we will need to cancel and restart the lease procurement with different parameters. This does not help provide optimal services in a timely way to St. Johns County veterans. And while we may be interested in exploring a partnership with the county government, our legal options to do so are also limited. Mr. Chairman, VA is focused on providing veterans top-quality, accessible care and services in the best facilities possible. We take this duty very seriously, and we're looking for ways to improve the speed, efficiency, and flexibility by which we provide access to care. VA has faced serious challenges in the execution of its leasing program in the past. We have learned from our mistakes and have made great strides recently in streamlining and managing our processes. Positive change is happening now. However, we can only change as much as we control, and we don't have control over many external factors that affect our processes. We believe changes are required to regulations governing federal leases, particularly in the area of medical facilities. We need the latitude to act more like a private sector healthcare provider when it comes to establishing facilities and getting services to veterans when and where they need them. That's why we exist as a department, and we need your help to fulfill our obligation. We believe, too, that 4 or 5 years is too long for our veterans to have to wait for new clinics. We are working to improve our part, and we will work with Congress and others to come up with workable solutions to reduce the constraints that impact our ability to best provide veterans the timely access to care and services they deserve. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss these important issues. We look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes Mr. Weiss for 5 minutes.
Chairman DeSantis and distinguished members of the subcommittee, I'm pleased to be here today to discuss our work examining schedule delays and cost increases at the VA's major leased outpatient clinics. The clinics provide both primary care and various other medical and dental services. As of November 2013, VA's leasing program had a long-run liability of $5.5 billion with a total of 1,889 leases. VA's Office of Construction and Facilities Management's Office of Real Property Services is responsible for acquiring land and leasing space for the construction of medical and medically related facilities for VA and provides guidance to regional and local VA offices regarding real property. My statement today discusses 1, schedule and cost increases for selected VA outpatient clinics we reviewed and the contributing factors involved, and 2, actions VA has taken to improve its leasing practices for outpatient clinics and any opportunities that may exist for VA to improve its management of project schedules and costs. This statement is based on our April 2014 report, which discussed 41 major outpatient clinic leases for which a prospectus was submitted to Congress as required by law for any lease over $1 million. The total contract value of these 41 projects was $2.5 billion. Our report noted that VA has experienced substantial delays in executing new outpatient clinic lease projects. Nearly all of the delays occurred in the planning stages prior to entering into a lease agreement. Specifically, we found that 39 of the 41 outpatient clinic projects for which VA submitted a prospectus experienced scheduled delays ranging from 6 months to 13.3 years, with an average delay of 3.3 years. 2 projects experienced scheduled time decreases. Our analysis showed that 94% of these delays occurred prior to entering into the lease agreement. For all but one of the projects that experienced a delay, the delay occurred during the pre-lease agreement stage. A number of factors contributed to the delays, including VHA's late or changing requirements, site selection challenges, and outdated guidance. In addition to substantial delays, our report noted that VA also experienced cost increases to its outpatient clinic projects when compared to the costs in the project's prospectuses. For the 31 projects with complete cost data, first-year rents increased a total of $34.5 million when compared to prospectus costs, an annual cost which will extend for 20 years, the life of these leases. The causes of the total cost increase can be attributed primarily to increases in the project's awarded first-year rent due to the schedule delays and/or changes in the design or scope of a project. Changes in a project's size expand the scope of the project, requiring design changes and schedule delays, further adding to costs. VA's made some progress in addressing issues with its major medical facilities leasing program. In 2012, VA formed a high-level council to oversee its capital asset program, including leasing. VA has been working on or planning the following improvements: requiring detailed design requirements earlier in the design process to help avoid the delays, scope changes, and cost increases, developing a process for handling scope changes, providing Congress with more complete information on the cost of proposed future lease projects, and refining and updating lease guidance. To improve the outpatient leasing program, we recommended that VA update VHA's guidance for leasing outpatient clinics to better reflect the roles and responsibilities of all VA staff involved in leasing projects. VA concurred with our recommendation and has actions underway to implement it. Chairman DeSantis and distinguished members of the subcommittee, this completes my prepared statement, and I'd be pleased to respond to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. The chair now recognizes Mr. Cameron for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman DeSantis and distinguished members of the subcommittee. It is a privilege to address you today on this important subject. The governing body of St. Johns County believes it is not just the federal government that has the responsibility of coming to the aid and assistance of those who have served this country, but that responsibility extends to every level of government. Up until this spring, our veterans enjoyed having a Veteran Service Office located directly beside the VA's Community-Based Outpatient Clinic, or CBOC, where they received assistance in filing for their benefits and appeals. In addition, at the same site, veterans had access to many other resources through our Division of Health and Human Services, such as food stamps, temporary assistance to needy families, affordable housing, credit counseling and credit repair, resume development, use of computers for job search and communication, and a host of other services. This ideal arrangement ended this spring when the VA refused to join other service providers and move the CBOC to the new state-of-the-art facility built by St. Johns County. Almost 4 years ago, in October of 2011, St. Johns County first notified the VA regional office in Gainesville there was a potential for a sale of the existing facilities to Lowe's Home Improvement. The VA was kept informed as the county entered into a contract with Lowe's, which ultimately closed in March of 2013, at which time the VA was notified that the premises must be vacated no later than March the 31st of 2015. Time does not permit detailing the timeline for this process, but I've included in your packages a sketch of that timeline. It became obvious in early 2014 the VA was not going to meet the March 31st, 2015 vacation deadline and would either have an interruption of clinical services to our veterans or a delay in the construction of the new Lowe's store, a crucial economic development and job-producing project. By the summer of 2014, the county became so alarmed that it offered to build a separate clinic at the new site and at one point even offered to relocate it their own agencies so the VA could use the space. When the vacation date arrived, the VA had no other viable options. In order to avoid interruption of services, it fell on St. Johns County to negotiate an extension with Lowe's and devise a plan to keep the old building operational. Including penalties and increased costs for operation, the VA's monthly cost went from approximately $26,000 a month to approximately $90,000 and will increase to approximately $135,000 a month on October the 1st of 2015. In addition, taxpayers will now have to pay for site preparation and modular units to house a temporary clinic. This is the new Health and Human Services building. The VA clinic would have been operating out of here today had they not steadfastly refused any meaningful dialogue with St. Johns County. Given this experience, it is our fear that the VA will make a serious error in selecting a site for a permanent clinic. The VA has put out at least 3 different search area boundary maps. One as far south as the southern county line. To date, they have refused to consider population growth patterns. The northern portion of the county is exploding, with the new town of Nocatee being the 3rd fastest growing community in the nation. It is critical the VA not make a mistake that the veterans of our county will have to live with for decades to come. St. Johns County is still willing to provide what has always been the VA's best option, an opportunity to locate with other essential services providers in the central location of the county. In short, St. Johns County has become a classic example of the overall problems plaguing the VA throughout the country. The VA is so insular that it has not only lost touch with those it is intended to serve, but it's lost connection and accountability to the Congress that created it. As an over-mature bureaucracy, it suffers from a policy sclerosis that denies it situational flexibility. Its focus is now on what is best for the bureaucracy and not what is best for the veterans it serves. The VA must once again become responsive to Congress and return its focus first and foremost to the welfare of the men and women who have served in our armed forces. I thank you again for the unique opportunity to appear before you, and I'm confident that this proceeding is an important step toward finding solutions to this nationwide problems. I would be pleased to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes himself for 5 minutes. You know, it just strikes me that the folks who serve our country in uniform and do so honorably, I mean, they show up on time. They're there, report for duty, they perform their duties. Some of them perform very, very difficult duties. Some of them have the scars and the wounds to prove it. And it's frustrating that we're here where these delays are really a matter of course. And that's just unacceptable. And Mr. Cameron, you mentioned this, but when did St. John's initially notify the VA that the property where the current VA clinic is located was sold, and how much time did VA have to relocate?
The VA, as well as all other agencies, after the closing, were notified immediately and had 2 years in order to make arrangements.
And they were notified that this was a possibility as early as 2011?
Actually, in October of 2011, it was first brought to the attention that it was a possibility, and they were notified again in the spring of 2012 that a contract had been entered into.
Now, during that same time, St. Johns County was able to move a number of their human services. And what was the extent of that project, and was St. John's able to complete that project within the time allotted?
Mr. Chairman, St. Johns County was able to construct that. They broke ground for that new facility in March of 2014. They built a 72,000 square foot facility in a little less than 12 months at a cost of $12 million. It came in on time and in budget, and we actually moved our folks in less than a year after ground was broken.
So, Mrs. Fiotis, has the VA selected a new permanent site for the outpatient clinic in St. John's? Can you hit your mic, please?
We have not yet selected a site, Mr. Chairman. We are in the final rounds of negotiations and value engineering of the current offers to see if we can reach an agreement with an offeror that would give us an operating lease.
But it's been over 3.5 years since the VA was first notified of this potential to be vacating. So why hasn't the VA found a site in that intervening period?
As I mentioned earlier, Congressman, we were late getting started, and for that we accept responsibility. At the time we did get started, which was in early 2013, shortly thereafter we were put on a temporary freeze because of the issues that had arisen with our leasing authorities and GSA. That stalled us.
What did you do to try to rectify that? Because when we were notified of this problem, we went to the GSA, and they were very interested in working with us and providing a waiver if necessary. And so it was, I was expecting this to be this big issue, but they seemed to be willing to work with us.
Unfortunately, that was not our experience. All our leases, not just this lease, every single lease, minor and major, was put on hold until we could come to an understanding with GSA
And did you raise that issue with the Congress?
I cannot remember specifically if we raised it with the
Mr.
Congress.
Doyle, without a permanent site selected and given the need to continue uninterrupted services to the veteran, you're now going to have to build an interim outpatient clinic. Now, does this strike you as an efficient use of taxpayer dollars, given the fact that VA's had a significant period of time to build the permanent facility or choose a permanent facility?
Mr. Chairman, I think the VA has stepped up and acknowledged that this is not the optimal solution that we had would have wanted. I'm happy to say, though, that on the interim lease, it's my contracting officers working with the program office that is on schedule. We are confident we will deliver the services by the end of the summer so that veterans...
Well, look, I hope so. I mean, we've been told that this was going to happen in the past on a certain schedule, and it hasn't happened. I'm concerned also about the taxpayer penalties that the taxpayer is now going to have to pay. The lease expired March of this year, and so now you're in a situation where you're paying $50,000 a month. That is then going to go up to, I believe, at least $100,000 a month. And so given that there was a lot of time and a lot of notice, how is that a good stewardship of taxpayer dollars?
Well, I would say, Mr. Chairman, that it is not a good stewardship of the chairman dollars, and it's not what I think in hindsight that the situation we would have endeavored to find ourselves in.
Now, Mr. Cameron, you have informed us that there is a footprint for a VA outpatient clinic at the location of the new Health and Human Services campus in St. Johns County, and you say that the county is still willing to build a clinic at that site and lease it to the VA at the same rate per square foot as the recently expired lease. You also say that the facility will be built to the VA's floor plan design and comply with the VA's elevation requirements. You've stated this is not financially advantageous to the county, but you believe it's the best outcome for local veterans. How has the VA responded to that offer?
As far as I know, Mr. Chairman, St. Johns County is not in consideration for a permanent site. There have been a number of reasons stated that we were not in consideration. And my last conversation while we were negotiating the holdover at the existing facility, when I said that St. Johns County stands ready to step up and provide this facility for the VA, I was told, and this is a direct quote, that is not happening.
Now, one of the VA's arguments for not being willing to accept the county's offer to have the permanent clinic within the HHS building is the 100-year flood zone issue. Now, did the county have similar concerns about building its own facility in this flood zone?
Mr. Chairman, that building is built on our campus, and we have hundreds of millions of dollars worth of investment in there. We have to be approved by 5 different agencies in order to build. We are not going to build a building in the floodplain.
And did you mitigate the concern of flooding when you chose the site and constructed the facility?
Yes, sir, we did considerable fill there.
And you're willing to offer to mitigate the same concern if the VA clinic was there?
Yes, sir. We believe that the outcome is worth any effort we might be required to make.
Now, the other argument that the VA has put forward has to do with demographics, that existing veteran population necessitates the site selection area to be south of the site where the current or the new HHS building is located. So how do you respond to the demographic argument that the VA has made?
From the beginning, Mr. Chairman, the VA has given us a number of different criteria that we were to proceed on. And by our GSI analysis in-house and use of the census data, we have the center of the veterans population located well north of the existing clinic and actually slightly north of our new clinic. Nocatee, being an explosive community, is got a significant veterans population coming in there. Veterans Services are locating there. K-9 for Warriors just opened their new facility this weekend there. Wounded Warriors is looking at it as a possible site too, and to ignore that growth pattern is unconscionable.
Now, Mrs. Fiotis, let me ask you this. I mean, this has been very frustrating for a lot of folks, certainly in my community, and reading the GAO report, I would imagine that there is a lot of frustration in other communities all across the country. Now, you have cited some of the factors and constraints that limit your ability to act as rapidly as maybe somebody in the private sector would do. So my question for you is, what reforms has the VA proposed to Congress for us to implement so that you will no longer have this problem?
Congressman, I don't believe we have proposed specific proposal at this point.
But why not? You know it's a problem. You've acknowledged it's a problem, and that's part of the, I think, the frustration, and not just with the VA. VA has a lot of frustration because it's such a big bureaucracy, but what we find is there are always kind of excuses as to why things aren't done right, but what we don't tend to get is, okay, well, what should we do if you're legally constrained? Tell Congress what we need to do to be able to free you to do your job so that the veterans are being served. And you're saying that the VA does not have a list of reforms that the Congress could implement right now?
None that we have shared with the Congress, but we are working with GSA and we are working with OMB to identify what improvements we might bring forward.
Well, I think we need to do this as quickly as possible. I think time's a wasting, and I think our veterans are being left to suffer. I am out of time, and I will recognize my friend for California.
Thank you. Having served on active duty in the Air Force in the 1990s and still being in the reserves, I hit 20 years this year. I am passionate and concerned about veterans. And I just want to first of all say thank you, because you said something that is far too rare on Capitol Hill. You uttered the statement, "We accept responsibility." Thank you for saying that. It tells me that you understand the challenges that are facing you, that you're working to make the problems better, and I appreciate that. I also note that the GAO report talks about things April 2014, and before that, these did predate Secretary McDonald coming in. They were not under his watch, so I look forward to the continuing leadership we're having from the Secretary. I do have a couple questions for you, Ms. Fiotis. First, are some of these challenges facing because you at the VA cannot sole source?
That is correct, Congressman. We are required to do our lease procurements in a competitive process because of the Competition and Contracting Act and because of federal regulations, and therefore we could not take the county up on its offer as a sole source offer. We did ask them to participate when we put out the solicitation, which they did. They were outside of the delineated area that the VA had established for that solicitation. Our methodology for identifying the delineated area is different from that which the county follows. We do not follow political boundaries. We do not look at county limits. We look at catchment areas, and we look at enrolled veterans. Those are some of the basic differences between our methodology, and that placed the delineated area south of the county's proposed site. That was the primary reason they were excluded from the initial competition.
Thank you. As you may know, in my district at the West Los Angeles VA campus, we cannot use enhanced use leases, which pretty much every other VA facility can. Do you believe having enhanced use leases would be important for the VA in your mission to help veterans?
Absolutely, Congressman, and Secretary McDonald has repeated the same as well in various venues. I think it would be one additional tool that we could use to help us take advantage of more opportunities to get facilities and to get private partners to help us in delivering those facilities. Absolutely.
Thank you. I have no further questions, so I'll give you the opportunity if you want to clarify anything at all during this hearing. If not, then I will yield back.
I would like to offer one more thing, and that's about the delays that are mentioned in the GAO report. And we acknowledge those delays, and we have taken many steps in addition to the ones you mentioned earlier. I think one of the most important things, and you noted that yourself, Mr. Chairman, that a lot of our delays happen in the upfront planning process, and a lot of the changes happen there. We now have a much more structured process for planning not only our construction, but also our major leases, to make sure that we right-size them the first time so that when we get the authorization, we can stay with that size that we have. We also have a process in place to manage scope changes in the department that elevates the requirement for change all the way up to the secretary if it's above a certain threshold before we can implement such a change. So I think we have the right processes in place to avoid delays and growth such as the ones we saw in the reports, in the reported leases in the GAO report, and I'm confident that we are doing much better in that. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. It was interesting because I was in Orlando when we opened the facility there. It's a huge, I mean, it's a great facility. And one of the speakers had got up and said, "Isn't this great?" He's like, "Look, it's over budget. It hasn't been done on time, but it's not that over budget. It hasn't been done that much over time, you know, given some of the other things." And so it was almost as if we were celebrating the fact that the cost overruns and the delays were, of course, they were there, but they weren't as much as you would see in a typical project. And I know that's not limited to the VA, but I just think that's not where we want to be. I mean, this should be a matter of course where we're getting this stuff done. Mr. Weiss, let me ask you, did that April 2014 report indicated that 39 of the 41 projects that GAO investigated were facing or faced some sort of delay? What was the nature of those delays, and what was the average delay?
Well, Mr. DeSantis, yes, you're correct. First of all, there were significant delays on almost all the projects that we looked at. And we found that basically the major issue that involved was, as I think we've talked about throughout this hearing, was the real issue with the requirements changing in the pre-planning process. And once the requirements were changing, that led to kind of a cascading effect of scope changes and further delays and land acquisition issues. So one thing all kind of fed on another, resulting in what ended up being pretty significant delays for a number of projects. I think the average we ended up with was a little over 3.3 years, if I recall. So this was a kind of an interwoven, intertwined process that led to some less than optimal results.
And so these are by and large pre-lease delays that are occurring?
That's correct, sir.
So in other words, if you lease a property or you hire someone to construct a facility, you know, there may be problems with that, but these are delays that are solely attributed to the government planning and execution initial process. Is that fair to say?
That was our conclusion.
Now, what about common delays? What are the most significant that you would see?
Well, basically, we found that, let me give you an example. We had, just every project seemed to have kind of its own unique characteristics, but you find a situation where maybe VA had changed because they had done demographic studies that maybe went back a number of years. So you end up with a situation where there was a thought that, well, maybe we're going to be serving a larger population than we thought we were, and so therefore we need a larger facility. So you decide to do some redesign, come up with plans for a larger facility, then they say, oh, wait a minute now, the land won't support that building anymore. The building won't, we need a bigger building for the numbers, and we need more land to support the building. So therefore, you run into the whole problem, then you have to acquire additional land, and that leads to, you know, all kinds of issues. The zoning and stakeholder interests come into play, and sometimes there are problems with environmental issues if you go to another site. So it just leads to a whole host of complicating factors that the bottom line is you can end up with some pretty significant delays.
Now, these requirement changes that you mentioned, can you just explain that? I mean, this is like they're in the middle of this, and then the requirements change, and so it ends up prolonging everything?
Well, they may have decided to add additional services, or there may be modernization of particular equipment that needs to be put into the place that maybe wasn't foreseen earlier. So therefore, perhaps a particular facility needs to be modified to accept this equipment. So you've got to go back and do some redesigning in order to make the building commensurate with the kind of equipment you want to put into it. That's one aspect of it. So, because some of the facilities, the planning went back a number of years, and by the time you got around to getting into the leasing aspect of it, you went back and realized that this doesn't quite fit the bill. And again, that results in these kind of, when requirements change, this results in scope changes and further delays.
Now, the delays in the report about determining the location of some of these sites, that struck me. There was, I think, a 7-year delay for the outpatient clinic in Las Vegas. For that Las Vegas, that delay, what was the reason for that?
Well, the problem in Las Vegas was one where the facility was located adjacent to Nellis Air Force Base, northeast of Las Vegas a bit. And I think the main problem they ran into there was that that was unforeseen was the fact that they were close to where the flight area was. And there was then an environmental issue, which is pretty common in military bases. We've seen in other real property work I've done, we often see BRACT military bases or other kinds of former bases with lots of environmental issues. And this had to do with aircraft and other kinds of residue that were left over from other kinds of activities at the base. And until you can get the NEPA requirements resolved, then you really can't proceed further with that. And so that resulted in a delay for constructing the Las Vegas facilities.
Now, what was the longest delay in the report?
I think the longest delay was about 13 years, and that was in the Jacksonville facility.
And what was the cause of that delay?
Well, again, that was kind of a complicated story with a number of factors interwoven to cause these delays. You had a situation where there was a parking garage that was supposed to be a shared facility between the city and the health clinic, but at the end that fell through, and again that resulted in having to acquire more land. Eventually, they were able to acquire more land, but that alone took a number of years, and so until you got all that resolved, and then there were additional environmental issues. It just went on until finally that was all able to get resolved over a very long period of time.
Now, based on the projects that you reviewed in your report, how would you characterize the delays as more things that were outside the VA's control or more shortcomings in the development and planning of the basic requirements of the projects?
The latter rather than the former, sir. In the case of there were certain things, in fairness to the VA, and when we spoke to officials there, they conveyed this to us, and we took that on board. There were certain areas that really they didn't have particular control over. For example, in the Las Vegas situation, they ran into a NEPA problem. There were a couple other facilities where they ran into problems with either a contractor defaulted or the contractor didn't perform and had to be fired, and so you kind of had to start over again with that. But those were a relatively small number of cases compared to the problems we identified that went into the pre-planning process with that was within the control of VHA.
Thank you. My time's expired. My friend from California, do you have another round of questions?
I do not.
Okay. Well, we have no more members here, so let me just thank the witnesses for their testimony and for answering our questions. We really appreciate it. We hope that this hearing has highlighted some of the shortcomings in this process, not just in my district, which is obviously,